We envision a larger network of leaders and champions of equity and justice, not only within our schools and community, but we want to see us influencing policy, creating new programs, leading initiatives that really challenge the status quo on a systemic level.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Ulric Shannon, Executive Director of the Surge Institute. Ulric, welcome to the show.
Hello, Joanna. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell us about the Surge Institute.
So Carmita Saman is our founder and CEO of the Surge Institute. She is an amazing genius, a brilliant Black woman from Birmingham, Alabama, who was fortunate enough to go to the University of Michigan, got a degree in engineering, then went to Northwestern, went to their B school, worked in corporate and was very successful there, worked with top officials in government, and found her way to Chicago Public Schools, where she started to question to say, wow, how did I, from Birmingham, Alabama, end up in decision-making rooms in a large school district, and I'm not seeing many others that look like me in this space, but we are serving people who look like me. And so from that, it was the manifestation of what we call a freedom dream of hers, where the Surge Institute came. She went to the very ends of the earth to make sure that Surge came to be. I'm talking $40 left in the bank account, all the money kind of wiped away until she received her first six-figure check to launch what I am now a benefit of. And so the Surge Institute, it really aims to promote diversity and inclusion within the education leadership by educating, elevating, and energizing leaders of color who create transformative change in their communities. And so our signature program here in Chicago, called the Surge Fellowship, is a 10-month Surge Fellowship that includes what I call game-changing courses, lessons from high-profile leaders, and a network of peers who focus on supporting each other. And so we hope by 2030, we'll be empowering and elevating over 5,000 leaders from across our programs by 2030, and know that this is not just about doing good, it's about doing what is necessary. Actually, in Chicago, only 21% our teachers are Black educators. And what we know is that many of those studies show that multicultural learning environments really support greater critical thinking, creativity, and reduce prejudice when we think about our young people exposed to different experiences across, racial friendships, allowing people to work together better.
Ulric, you just shared a big mouthful, so I got a bunch of questions about Surge. First of all, when your founder said, I'm not seeing people like me, and she said, I'm not seeing people like me in education. What setting are we talking about? K-12, colleges, universities, teaching, administration? What was she talking about?
Initially, I think she was talking about our K-12 space. So large school K-12 districts across the country, specifically Chicago at the time, being the third largest. And so she happened to be at the kind of a C-suite level, not seeing many folks there. And even if you trickle down to middle management, you were not seeing it. I think we're still seeing those. The district has done a much better job, and I think that is a testament to what Surge has done, but we still have a long way to go, I'll say.
Ulric, why is it important if I'm a little girl who's African-American or Filipino-American, why is it important for me to have teachers who are maybe look like me? Why is that important?
There's so many benefits to that. One is like, you can't be who you can't see.
Ah.
And so we often talk about like the gaps in educators and folks not wanting to become educators because many of our young people don't get to see a person that looks like them or sounds like them or from their community serving as their teacher. Even for myself, I had one Black male teacher when I was at elementary school, and it was my music teacher, and I loved music because of that. And so I think that our young people, outside of the simple teaching from the curriculum, you actually get a lot more connection based off of culture, all these parts of our identities, creating a more safe space for students
Hmm.
because they have actually so much more access to information, I think, than I had as a kid with the internet, is that they need that safe space from a person who looks, feels, and sounds like them and who can be a decision maker for the types of instruction and curriculum that's presented to have the type of engagement that we would want from our students.
Well, man, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk about what makes Surge so successful. But before we do that, I want to dive into your journey. So you say you're a proud alum. How did you get to become ED of the Surge Institute?
It was truly a divine assignment. I would not have put this on my bingo card, but I am forever grateful. I started my career as a third grade teacher. It was not something that I expected to do. I thought I'd be president of the United States by 2020 as I got a master's in political science, studied at Oxford, did all the things, and a recession happened.
There's still time, by the way.
Yes, well, maybe. Like, I don't know. But when I came back home, it was a recession, and my mother said, I don't care how many degrees you have, because neither one of my parents have a college degree, and so being a first generation college graduate and professional, my mom said, you need to get out there and get a job that makes some pretty decent money. And I ended up in a classroom and I taught third grade, all boys in the far south side of Chicago, and I fell in love with education.
Wait, so hang on. How did you end up becoming a teacher of all things? Why that specific profession?
I did not enjoy school as an early student, like elementary school. I did not enjoy it. It wasn't until high school that I fell in love with learning. And I knew that coming from a community where many of my peers were not allowed to or had access to a selective enrollment high school like I did, or the opportunity to go to college like I did, I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to go back to my community, to pour back into Chicago. And
Hmm.
so while I wanted to be president at the core, I really just wanted to help people because that's what I thought the president did. And so that was just my way of leaning into my service part of my spirit by going back into the classroom. And I'll say, as much as I thought I can pour into those young Black boys that were in front of me every day, I learned so much from them that I knew that this would be the place that I would probably be for the rest of my life.
So you're a third grade teacher, and then what happens?
And then my position was cut. How crazy is
Ah,
that? I thought my life was coming to an end. However, I was fortunate enough to have so many great educators around me who saw the work that I was doing with families. I was recruited and brought into central office, Chicago Public Schools, to support and lead the work of family community engagement for about 90 schools within CPS. Loved doing that for about 7 years. After that, I worked in many of the large nonprofit organizations that many of us are probably very familiar with. And then also worked in a small charter network where I had supported our teacher contract negotiations, family community engagement, external affairs work. And I did Surge during that time. And so that was my first introduction to Surge. My boss at the time was like, I think you should do Surge. And I was like, what's that? And I went to an event and I was overwhelmed with the incredible people that I saw in the room. I did not think I was ready, prepared. I had enough experience to be in the room with those brilliant people. And I ultimately applied. I got in. And that is when my world completely changed. And so I was a graduate of the program in 2020. And that is where I first got my experience with Surge, and now really proud and honored to serve as the executive director of the Surge Institute.
well, what an inspiring story that you're an alum of the fellowship program and now you're running the Surge Institute in Chicago.
Or it's running me sometimes.
Well, let's turn to Surge. So, your signature program is the fellowship program. Tell us about that. How does that work?
We typically take about 20 to 25 fellows from across the city of Chicago or the Chicago landscape who are primarily focused on education or youth serving roles. There are very minimum requirements for the program. It is living in the city of Chicago or the Chicagoland area, have at least 6 years of experience within the education space, and really have a commitment to transforming their community and being self-reflective. There is an application and interview process, but this 10-month fellowship includes what I will call game-changing courses. They get lessons from high-profile leaders, and they get a network of peers who are really focused on supporting each other. And so they get to learn things from negotiations and communications and project and program management. But we also do a lot of internal work about who you are and who are you here to serve. And so it is feels like an MBA with a little bit of therapy, with a greater community that really allows our already genius and brilliant folks in the education space really building up their confidence to go into spaces, to make the decisions, to do it with pride, with courage, and with a real heart around the meaning of what they want to do for the impact of their school, their organization, or their community. And so over that 10 months, that's just the beginning of their journey. And then they go into our alumni hood, which is a whole nother amazing experience, I'll say, that they'll have for life.
Let me ask you a question. So you take 20 to 25 professionals that already have experience in the schools, and are they teachers, administrators? And what do you want them to become as a result of the fellowship program?
That is a great question. And so our fellows have ranged drastically from classroom teachers to school leaders to superintendents of school districts. We take those who are deeply committed to transforming the types of change that we want. So folks will throw out the words like DEI and equity. Like, what does that actually look like in action? And so throughout this journey, folks are unlearning to relearn so that when they go back into whatever their organization or maybe they launch their own organization, they are ready to fully show up in all of their identities, all of the parts of their racial identity, and leverage those as powerful tools to make a difference in their communities. And so there are what we call head, heart, and spirit work that we do during our fellowship. And so our folks come out with promotions or they launch their own organizations. I just give one example from our first cohort. Candace Moore, who was actually the first chief equity officer for the city of Chicago,
Wow.
was a civil rights attorney when she went through our program. And so she often contributes her experience through Surge is helping her land and get to the position of the chief equity officer, the very first in our city.
Give us examples of the types of courses that people are taking as part of the fellowship program, because this sounds amazing.
I think one of the core things that we often start off with that allows us to do a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of history as well. We lean into things like writings by Martin Luther King Jr., one being a staple of like Letter from a Birmingham jail. Or we lean into things specifically around our specific region, so Chicago, listening and learning and reading about Harold Washington. And so we do a lot just to learn about the geographical landscape, the history of where we come in a country and the impacts that it has on education. But we also dive into those executive functioning skills like communications, negotiations, program and project management. We take a culmination of these events, and there's kind of two core experiences that our fellows have. One being what we call a critical collective, where they receive a real world challenge that many probably schools and districts are facing, and they work as a team to come up with a solution and present that to a team of judges. And lastly, we close with what we call a freedom dream, where we give our fellows the opportunity to really imagine a world that maybe feels impossible and leaning into your own strengths, your
Wow.
own experiences. What would you do in this world to get us a little bit closer to freedom and liberation? And so they're actually able to launch those freedom dreams, and they can even apply for what we have at Surge called Surge Angels, where last year we were able to give away up to $100,000 to our fellows to really propel their freedom dreams. And so it's not just about hearing those great ideas, but we invest in those ideas, and hopefully they'll come to our communities and make a really huge and impactful change that we would like to see. And that is actually happening in our spaces.
Ulric, how are you funded that you are able to provide this really very intense cohort experience, as well as provide this funding?
It takes a lot to run this program with, in our current cohort, we have 25 fellows. But one, I would say we are fortunate enough to have great partners and family foundations and philanthropy who support and believe in our work, many who have been really longtime supporters of Surge. We also have a bunch of great individual givers who will contribute to the purpose of our work. And then we also have directly from our alums. So we have an impact community where our alums are pouring back monthly into the fellowship because they talk about the impact that it's had on them. And I've been doing the impact community. I've been pouring back since I graduated in 2020, and I just would never change that. And lastly, we do collect a tuition. There is a $5,000 tuition for each fellow, often paid by their employer. We offer scholarship opportunities. And then we, at minimum, if you receive a full scholarship, we ask that the fellow pay at least $500 of that. And so I would say that's the very minimum that we collect from fellows, but the majority comes from employers who have seen and believe and have benefited from the experience of Surge. And then our wonderful funders who have supplied us the opportunity to provide scholarships.
So, Ulric, you've got something called Power Surge, which targets a different community. So tell us about that.
Surge has been around for 10 years, and maybe in our seventh or eighth year, we start to realize that a lot of our fellow supervisors were asking about, well, where's the Surge for me?
Oh.
And so it is often hard to get, our fellows go through, they go back to work and they talk about their experience, and many of their supervisors say, well, can you bring that information back? It is often very difficult to duplicate what we do back into your space in your organization. But we started to hear from those supervisors saying, well, I don't know if I want to do the fellowship after somebody that reports to me has done it. Like, what do you have for me? And so we started to think about, like, what is the other program that we could provide? And so maybe 2-3 years ago, we launched what we call Power Surge, that is specifically for our C-suite executives in education who apply just like the regular fellowship. And then they go through a shorter version of our fellowship to build community across organization, but aligned in value and purpose. And so we have had 2 cohorts of Power Surge that range from like superintendents and chief equity officers who get to learn from others who are leading and innovating in the space of education inside and outside of the classroom, and helping them build community because, like I shared earlier, while there are few people of color in the decision-making roles and rooms, they often have a very small, or if not at all, a community. And so this allows them the opportunity to build community with those who sit in those seats that can often feel very lonely, leadership, giving them a community to talk about their experiences and understand that what they're going through is not a unicorn. You have community and you have space to kind of process those things so that you can actually show back up full to serve many of the large districts that take a lot out of folks. And so it has been a demand, and we look forward to bringing that back next year.
Well, it sounds like you're giving your participants really solid skills to kind of get ahead and really realize their dreams, but you're also creating a powerful network. So you've got an alumni network and you've got something called the Black Principal Network. So tell us about those, because they sound really powerful and you want to be part of these networks, it sounds like.
You absolutely do. And so we know that there is a shortage of principals. What we also know is that people are not retiring from the principalship anymore. People are in for a few years and then they're out, and then schools are stuck with no principal or searching for a principal. And we know school needs to go on. And so we absorbed the Black Principals Network 3 years ago as a part of our search programming. And a proud alum in my cohort, Tara Shawn Gibson, who's the executive director of the Black Principals Network, was once a principal in Chicago Public Schools, and it was really hard to get her to lead that role to come here. But now she gets to pour into a national organization that supports Black principals across the country through regular programs that we provide for free virtually. But we also have the Leadership Collaborative, which is a fellowship for Black principals. And so they also go on a 6-month journey together to have community for themselves and really fine-tune their skills to really go back and be able to support their schools and see themselves in higher positions and roles where they can implement larger, more systemic level changes and organizational changes that will really support the Black and Brown students that they are providing a service to. And so taking them from one leadership role to the next, but also providing them with the community that they need to survive in that role. And if you've ever been a principal, you know how hard, how challenging, how exhausting, but also how rewarding it could be. And a space like this is many principals are banging on our door asking for support and space and to get into fellowship. And so it has been beautiful to watch them build community, even across the country where folks are like, in the South, it's a little bit different in the North, but they're finding some commonality and they're finding ways to navigate some of their own individual challenges collectively.
And do your networks cross-pollinate with each other? The principals with the C-suite, with the folks from the fellowship program, do they all get together? Can they get together?
Absolutely. So we are in many cities across the country. Chicago probably has about almost 250 alums across all of our programming here in Chicago. So we often have a lot of events where folks can get together, whether it's a right to read screening or a fireside chat with an elected official or high influential person in education. But we also have things like our alumni convening that we host biannually. And so that'll happen next year, where we get to bring together all of our alums from across the country to be in community, to learn from each other, with each other, but also to have a good time together because we also deserve those things. And so it is something that people look forward to every year, every other year. They're asking us now, when is that going to happen? Also, we're going to be celebrating our 10 years. And so even this week, we're going to be hosting our 10-year celebration, Ascension, to celebrate 10 years of high impact and looking forward to the future of what Surge is going to bring to not just specifically Chicago, but our country.
Well, speaking of 10 years, what will the next 10 years look like for Surge? Do you have an idea of that?
Joanna, I don't know if I should release all of our secrets. No.
Give us one or two.
The Surge, we're never going to steer away from our mission. And so Surge Future is really about scaling impact. We envision a larger network of leaders and champions of equity and justice, not only within our schools and community, but we want to see us influencing policy, creating new programs, leading initiatives that really challenge the status quo on a systemic level. And so we look forward to seeing our fellows from our classroom all the way up to hopefully one day the presidency to really have that type of level of influence and policy and creating new programs that are birthed here right within our program. And so we continue to look forward to doing that and implementing some new innovations around what does it mean to be an educator? What does that mean to be a leader in the education space? And so that is what we look forward to in the future here at Surge.
Ulric, thank you for a high energy and just very inspiring interview. Thank you for all that you're doing in Chicago and I guess around the country. I hope you'll come back in the future and share with us all the amazing things that Surge is doing.
I would love to, Joanna. And if you want more information about Surge, just check out our website, surgeinstitute.org, and see how you can get involved. Thank you so much for your time today, Joanna.
Absolutely. We'll put a link in the show notes. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. You know, my personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Bye!